This is Art Crush with artists Paula Telizyn and Fee Marks, where we talk about art, deconstructing colonialism, feminism, and more. And today we are going to talk about what happens when you fall out of love with your own art as an artist. Hello, Fee.
Hi, Paula. Nice to see you today.
It's been a while since we've recorded a podcast episode. So, for our listeners, it'll be about 5 minutes between the last one and this one.
Uh, but
But
I know there are people waiting. So,
yes,
we are getting there slowly. Just life has sort of got in the way, hasn't it?
it really has. But we've been talking about a lot of really interesting things, not only on the podcast, but between the two of us about what art is and art making and what it is to be an artist and all of that. And for a lot of artists who may have been productive, they could be finding themselves facing art block or lack of desire to create more art. They could be finding themselves at loose ends. So we kind of want to talk about that today.
I think it's almost like as well that I know people are very they're quite happy about calling themselves emerging artists, but they struggle with the word established. Maybe we don't need those words anymore. Maybe we just call each other artists. But when we talk about people who've perhaps been running their business for about 5, 6+ years, and they've perhaps created a name, they've had some success with the type of art that they've done, which is both the case for you and I, Paula. We
Mm.
found a genre that people loved and we were able to sell our art. But we found that you cannot, for many reasons, just continue to just regurgitate the same things because you want to develop personally as an artist. You don't want to get bored with what you're doing. And also, people need to see fresh stuff all the time and slightly different stuff because otherwise it becomes, oh, yes, I've seen that before.
Yeah, there's something to be said about boredom as an artist though, because it boredom forces us, especially if you're of a certain age where you grew up and there was no television and no internet and no none of that. Boredom was a way to spark creativity. So when I talk to the artists I work with, I encourage boredom because it forces our brains to figure out how to get that stimulation, and we often come up with deeper versions of our styles. So for example, if you do collage, you might find new ways of expressing yourself through collage, new things to include in your collages because you're bored with what you've been doing all along, right? It forces you to push yourself. But there is a point where you've been creating and you no longer feel maybe attached to what you're making, which is the point where I'm at, where I don't want to make the art I used to make. And I have to sort of not start from scratch, but rebuild because I miss that connection. I miss that driving passion. I miss feeling like I live and breathe my art. If I'm not creating my art, I'm thinking about my art. And I haven't had that for a little while because I have had the disconnect between what I was creating and what I want to create. And that's where a lot of artists end up because if you're not paying attention to what you desire to make and you're not paying attention to what you want, you may end up finding yourself with either the gap between what you're making and your desires to make, or you find yourself with artist block because you finally just can't keep going.
As people who are interested in learning and evolving, we do a lot of work on ourselves, which I think is really, really important because it's something that most people have not had the luxury to be able to do. But as artists, that's going to impact on our work. So, um, your work when I met you, Paula, was very much reflected the place where you were psychologically at that time. And you have since then evolved and developed and are in a different place than you were 6, 7 years ago. And so your work needs to change in the same way as it could be that you've done this message and you want to say more. Because as we've said in previous podcasts, it's all about communication and what you've got to say. And if you are not feeling great about yourself, that is then going to reflect in what you paint.
Yeah, and I think also as artists, we have this wonderful sort of added bonus of curiosity, right? We get curious about ourselves, we get curious about the world. And in that curiosity, we get to learn new things. So when you learn about yourself or you learn about what's going on in the world and you change how you think about things, your messaging also changes. Because one of the things I think that's most important is as artists is understanding why we create, what we're trying to say, what messaging we want to put out through our work, and being intentional about it makes such a huge difference. So previously my work was very pop culture oriented. I'm very much a story person. As a writer, I love stories. I've always loved stories. They are my air. Couldn't exist without a good story. And so my work reflected that, but it didn't reflect and it can't reflect the changes I've gone through since, intentionally and unintentionally, in the years since I've switched tracks. And I've tried a bunch of different things randomly. Like I've been doing surreal art, but it depressed me because it was very much reflecting what I thought about the world today and people in it. And so I couldn't keep that up because it wasn't a passion of mine. And if I'm creating art that makes me depressed, I don't want to keep making it because
Fair enough.
yeah, it's not helpful. So we sat down, you and I, and talked about how to reboot my own art. And you had some really good ideas. One of which was based on what I teach was get to know my new why and ask those questions that I teach. So
Can
yeah.
I just say that was the biggest pause in I don't know if we were voice noting or we were texting, when I actually turned the tables on Paula and just said, well, why do you want to create that? What is your why? It went very quiet. She was probably laughing, going, "Oh my God, the boot is on the other foot now. The worm
Honestly.
has turned."
Honestly, yeah. It definitely made me stop and think. But I think the next thing that you had said to me, which I haven't told other people to do, and I think that that was a huge loss, is you said go to Pinterest and start looking at art you like. Don't worry about, whether it's a landscape or abstract or whatever, but just save pins of the art you like and see what comes up. So I immediately revitalized my Pinterest account, brushed off the cobwebs and all of that, and went onto Pinterest and started going through art. And I started seeing patterns. I've got, I don't know, somewhere around 100 pins of art now saved, but I started seeing patterns in what I liked. And it's very different from the kind of art I was making, which was, yes, it was painterly, but it was very neat art. There wasn't any
Mm.
kind of smudging going on or anything like that. And I've started looking at artists that create texture and they smudge and they have random shapes in the middle of things. And I still, to my surprise, but maybe not surprise, leaned very hard towards figurative art. So still with the portraits. As much as I liked doing landscapes and all that, I found them boring and I found them boring to pin. So an abstract just doesn't interest me. I end up always making mud. So
And, and I find it really interesting because both of us, even though our art styles are very, very different, the actual core of it is very similar, that both of us are very, very strong on narrative and storytelling and
mm,
also drawn to figurative art. And yet, a lot of artists out there will run a mile from figurative art. It's quite unique. I hadn't really realized until I was doing a group exhibition and realized that I was the only figurative artist there. It was like, oh, okay. But it's interesting that both of us, that's what we're drawn to. That's what I know I love to look at,
Yeah.
as you said. And going to Pinterest, which I say is a bit like my artist's Bible, that is how I go, and I spend hours on there looking at things, searching for information. And it is just brilliant for that. And it's really defining. So I'm really intrigued to know you. So you were drawn to um, portraits mainly, or were they figurative? But more,
Figurative. Mhm.
yeah, figurative, more sort of using. It was the change in media that you found interesting, using a big range of different textures and media, that you realized that was where how you're feeling now.
Yeah, not so much media in terms of like collage or whatever, but just in terms of how to handle it. So I'm still a
Yeah.
painter at heart, but it's the creating the feeling of smudging and the complicated textures and the grittiness of it. Almost like if you mix graffiti with painting kind of thing. I mean, graffiti is painting, but like more classical painting and graffiti. I don't know how to explain it, but it helped me sort of eliminate some things. And I went through and I started copying some of the paintings that I saw, not in order to break somebody's copyright, but just to get a feeling for the style, but without becoming that person. So that's the other thing that I'm being very aware of is that when I copy an artist's work, I'm not copying an artist's work, not like the old masters used to do to their apprentices.
I'm not
It's
sure you and I could ever copy.
no,
It would just
no.
always come out different. It's inspired by.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to see what techniques I could use in my own style. So it's also intentionally creating a style because one of the most important things as a professional artist is to have an established style that is recognizable. It doesn't mean that the style can't change and shift as you refine your work because your work fee from start to finish, so from your very first painting back in 2019-ish, it still looks like a fee marks, but your work has refined and become more skilled, more technically um, tighter is the word I'm looking for. Like it's tightened up, but it's still identifiably a fee marks from start to finish. And that's what I'm looking for is to create that if somebody sees a piece, even if my name isn't on it, I still want them to be able to say that's a Paula Telizyn. That is a art created by her. And I did this the last time when I was doing all the portraits. I created a style that involved a lot of neons and simplifying shapes and creating these recognizable portraits. So when my art was stolen by a website, it was actually I don't even remember all the details. That was a while back. My followers and fans were messaging me going, "We saw your art on this website. They didn't attribute it to you, blah 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 blah," and it was already taken down before I had to do anything about it because it was recognizably mine and people were, pissed off about it.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at creating using not fighting who I am as a creator, but using my styles, trying to create an established style that is recognizably mine in done by my hands. So when I copy or are inspired by other artists, I'm looking to see what techniques I could incorporate into my own look.
And I do think as well, and and I'm sure a lot of the listeners would agree, I love, and I've heard this from quite a few artists friends. I mean, I just love using my fingers in the paint. I love smudging. I love, particularly when I'm painting faces. I will use a brush, but I will smudge, and it's almost like having that deep connection with your work, which you can only get if you physically manipulate paint in the area. And for me, I there's something very special about that moment. I don't do it very often. I mean, I don't do it all the time, but every painting at some point I will have blended with my fingers, a bit like you blend makeup, I suppose. But it's
Yeah.
having that connection with the canvas.
Yeah, that's really important. I'm not actually painting on canvas or anything right now. I'm doing everything digitally for the first time. Something I never thought I would do because I work digitally in my day job. I'm forever at a computer, but for the sake of just being able to drop and quickly produce some art, going onto my iPad and using Procreate and all that has made it so that there's no barrier between my desire to create and my ability to create. I don't have to go to the basement and take the laundry off my chair because my easel's now between the furnace and the washing machine. And then I don't have to, fill the bucket with water and wedge myself into the between my in front of my easel between the washer and the furnace and do the work. Like it's annoying. Unfortunately, in this place I'm living with, that was the place where my art easel ended up being just wedged in a corner in the laundry room. So it became a barrier to creating. And so in this experiment, I'm also leaping mediums, even though I'm still using painterly tools, they're digital. So yeah, I'm not putting my hands in paint for the first time ever.
Don't you miss it?
Yes and no, because the aggravation of physically painting right now was greater than my need to paint. So there is that. If I could get a space where, I have a window and I have room to move and I can actually step back from the canvas. I have no space to step back either. Part of my process was to add paint to a canvas and then step 3 or 4 feet back, see how it works, and then approach the canvas again. I can't do that right now.
Mm.
So the space isn't working for me at all.
No, you need to find another space.
Yeah, and it might have to be outside of my house. So
Mm.
that's something that's going to have to wait, but it's definitely, you know, removing a barrier by going digital, I think was really important. And I think this is also for artists like artists who desire to create will find a way or make a way to make their art. If you don't have tools, you'll be scrabbling, with a stick in the dirt. Or if you have something that you envision in your mind, you'll find a napkin and a pen. You'll find a way and make a way, right? And so I was just like, I need to paint. I hate painting in my space. How do I achieve this desire to build my new style, to build my new why and all of that without being annoyed about it. And trust me, I tried to paint in that space. And
I'm sure you did.
I produced six pieces
We're
of
not we're not easily thwarted.
no, no. I produced six pieces of garbage and I hate wasting canvas, but they
Yeah.
just required to be binned. It was just awful. So I think the whole point in this episode, I think, is to say, you don't have to decide that artist block is it. That's it. You're done creating your art. There are messages within that artist block that maybe you're not creating what you want to create anymore. Maybe you're misaligned with your subject matter,
Yeah.
or you're misaligned with what you're trying to say. And then there are ways to get out of it. There are ways to intentionally create pieces that will become your new style and your new messaging and communication. And it starts with deciding who you are as a person and being curious about that.
So do you think this is the big question now, Paula Telizyn? How close are you to finding your why? Do you know yet? Or have you still got some homework to do?
I've got some homework to do, but between talking with you and another artist, I know that my why still lies with stories. It's still a narrative. I still love the story, and I just need to sort of refine that down. Life in the last week or so has gotten really freaking busy. So that's something I'm going to look at next week. But sitting down and just spending time with myself and asking me why, what do I have to say? What matters to me? What's important? What is the purpose of my art? Because we all have a reason for creating. It may start out as, oh, creating art feels good, but actually underneath that there's always a reason why we're creating. We want people to experience something magical with us. We want people to pay attention to something we noticed. We want people to feel a feeling that we have. We are inviting the viewers into our hearts and minds and souls. What are we wanting them to get out of that experience through our art? So that's something I need to refine, but story is a huge driver in everything I do.
I think that goes without saying, really. And I know if you think about most art, it should have a story, shouldn't it? It should be telling people. It could have a message, but within that message will be within a story. This is happening. This is my belief. Boom. You know,
Yeah.
it's integral. I mean, I think it's obviously integral to all the arts. We're not just talking about art, but music takes you on a journey. Obviously, theatre, cinema, dance. You know, it's that's what as a human we crave.
Yeah. Yeah, and we can see that even in the cave paintings that are, whatever they are, 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 years old. We see story within that, whether it's informational or instructional or whatever. Humans have always told stories. So maybe that's a little bit too generic. I love a good story. I love deep emotion. Like I have to sit down and refine that. But for me,
Mm.
understanding that I want to tell a story through my work intentionally is still important. I don't just want to go, that's a nice vase of flowers. I want there to be subtext in my work. I want there to be deeper meanings and things I infer that maybe some people will get and some people won't. So, yeah,
And as I think we mentioned when we talked about artist block in season one, um, it's like when you are feel like you're struggling, the work isn't actually in your painting or your whatever medium you're using, it's in your head. You need to go back and look at your responses and, have you just become bland or blind almost to the message that you were originally portraying? And is that still relevant now? And if not, what do you want to say now? What story do you want to tell?
so that wraps up this episode of Art Crush, where Fee and I have been talking about how I've been overcoming and working to overcome artist block and a disconnection between myself and my art. And hopefully, something in what we've said might help you if you're going through the same thing. Restart your art style, your career, your creativity, and all of that, because there's nothing worse than an artist who can't create. It just sucks hard. For more episodes of Art Crush, you can go to Spotify or your favorite podcast platform or check it out on our websites at feemarks-art.co.uk and paulatelysian.com. We'll catch you in the next episode.